You know, when a man becomes nervous around a woman, most people chalk it up to shyness or awkwardness. They interpret it as weakness, but that's a shallow interpretation. It's a misreading of something deeper, something far more meaningful. What you're actually witnessing, in many cases, is a manifestation of reverence, a kind of unconscious acknowledgement that this person matters, that this interaction holds weight. It's not just another social exchange. It's something that could change the trajectory of his life. And when the stakes are that high, anxiety enters the equation, not because the man is weak, but because he cares. You see, when we truly care about the outcome of something, when something becomes psychologically significant to us, it activates our nervous system. Our heart rate increases, we become self-conscious, we overthink, and ironically, it's that very intensity of care that begins to disrupt the smooth execution of social behavior. Now, that's interesting, because you'd think that caring would make us better, more present, more effective. But often, at least at first, it makes us worse, clumsier, less articulate, more prone to hesitation. That's because love, real romantic potential, is destabilizing. It opens us up, and the male psyche, especially one unaccustomed to vulnerability, doesn't quite know how to process that in real time. It's easier to be confident when nothing's at stake, when it doesn't matter. You can glide through a conversation, crack jokes, look cool because there's no emotional risk. But when you sit across from someone who does matter, someone who makes your chest tighten and your thoughts scatter, the risk of rejection becomes real. And for a man, particularly one with some emotional history or a strong internal framework, that kind of risk isn't taken lightly. A man who gets nervous around you is, in many ways, telling you, without words, "I don't want to fail in your eyes." And that is not weakness. That is humility. That is admiration. That is emotional sincerity struggling to make its way to the surface. And if you're a woman on the receiving end of that awkward energy, don't dismiss it so quickly. It's not always a lack of confidence. Often, it's a profound respect for your presence. It's a signal that he sees value in you, beyond the superficial. That he's measuring his words because he wants them to land well. That he's pausing because he's thinking. That he's struggling because he's sincere. You know, people spend their lives chasing sincerity, trying to find someone who means what they say. Someone who's not performing. And when you find it, when you find someone who's disarmed enough by your presence to forget his rehearsed lines and fumble his delivery, you might just be looking at something real. Of course, over time, if he's grounded and honest, that nervous energy transforms. It becomes calm confidence, not the bravado of a man trying to impress, but the poise of a man who's found stability in your presence. That's the ideal, but at the beginning, it's messy, it's awkward, it's vulnerable, and that's exactly why it's real. So the next time you see a man stumbling through his words, giving awkward glances, or shifting uncomfortably in his chair, don't mock it. Don't write it off. Look deeper, because the things that make us nervous are often the things that matter most. And what's more worth getting nervous over than love? Let me know if you want the rest of the points written in a similar style. One of the most telling indicators that a man is genuinely interested in a woman isn't his compliments or his gifts or even the time he spends with her, though all those things can be significant. No, one of the most profound signs, perhaps even the most revealing, is the kind of questions he asks her. Not surface-level questions, those are easy. Anyone can ask what your favorite color is, or what show you're currently watching. Those are safe, they're templates, they don't require vulnerability, nor do they ask for it in return. But when a man begins to ask questions that touch the psychological core, questions like what are you afraid of? Or what was your childhood like? Or when did you last feel truly alive? Those are not accidental, those are intentional, and more than that, they're revealing of where his attention is focused. You see, when someone starts asking questions that don't just skim the surface, but instead dig into your emotional architecture, it means they're not interacting with you as a collection of roles or appearances. They're trying to map out your inner world. They're trying to understand not just who you are right now, but why you are the way you are. And that, psychologically speaking, is rare and extremely meaningful. People don't ask those kinds of questions unless they're either doing therapy or they're falling, because those questions are investments. They're attempts to comprehend complexity, and the only reason we ever try to understand something so deeply is because it matters to us. It's as simple as that. Now, this can often come off as strange, a little intense, maybe even unsettling, particularly if you're not used to someone actually seeing you. But that strangeness, that intensity, is part of the point. Because love, or even the early stages of romantic curiosity, isn't supposed to feel sterile or procedural. It's supposed to disorient you a little. It's supposed to break you out of autopilot. So when a man looks you in the eye and says something like, "What scares you the most about the future?" he's not trying to catch you off guard. He's trying to reach into the truth of who you are beyond the mask. He's trying to see the architecture of your soul, because somewhere, deep inside, he hopes to belong in it. Think about how much easier it would be to just stick to flirtation. To stay on the surface, make a few jokes, compliment your appearance, and leave it there. That would be safer, more efficient, less risky. But to ask, what did you need most as a child that you didn't get? That's not efficient. That's not flirtation. That's sacred ground. That's psychological intimacy. And the truth is, not every man can do this. In fact, most won't, because this requires him to be in touch with his own emotional landscape. It requires him to listen deeply without trying to solve or fix or dominate the conversation. And it requires him to be present, fully present, with whatever answer you give. A man who asks you deep, strange questions is saying, "I want to understand you," not in a strategic way, not in a manipulative way, but in a fundamentally human way, because to love someone, truly love them, you have to be willing to enter their world. And to enter someone's world, you have to ask for directions, not through maps or logic, but through questions that reach into memory, emotion, and belief. And when a man does that, he's not just making conversation, he's making room for you in his mind, and possibly in his life. Let me know when you're ready for point 3 in the same style. There's a peculiar thing that happens when a man truly admires a woman, something that often goes unnoticed, or is dismissed as awkwardness, even creepiness, by those who don't understand the psychological underpinnings of attraction, and that is, he stares, he gets caught looking, sometimes for a second too long, sometimes so long that he has to pull his eyes away and pretend he was thinking about something else entirely. Now, let's be clear, this isn't about objectification. This isn't the gaze of someone who merely finds you physically appealing. This is something deeper, slower, less reactive, and more contemplative. It's the kind of gaze that attempts to process you, to understand the convergence of all the things that make you who you are. It's a kind of quiet awe. And what's particularly interesting about this is that it's often involuntary. He might not even be aware that he's doing it, because in that moment, his rational mind, the part responsible for conversation, social norms, and self-consciousness, is offline. It's not driving. Something more primal and intuitive is taking over. It's a kind of orientation reflex. The brain recognizes significance and locks on, You're not just another person in the room. You're the center of the room. He looks at you like he's watching something he doesn't want to end, like a sunset or the first snow or the firelight flickering in a dark room. And it's not about lust, though there may be desire present. It's about meaning. It's about trying to absorb in a brief span of time what the soul might take years to understand. From a psychological perspective, this kind of attentiveness is rare. Most people don't actually see each other. They glance, they scan, they assess, but to truly look, without agenda or distraction, that's a form of presence. And presence is always a precondition for love. This is why you'll notice that when a man is truly captivated, he often forgets to speak. The words don't come because he isn't trying to say something. He's trying to feel something. He's trying to determine if what he's seeing is real. And part of him, sometimes without knowing it, is wrestling with a profound question. Why does this person matter so much to me, so suddenly, and so deeply? Now, this kind of gaze can be unsettling, especially if you're not used to being seen that way. It's disarming, almost vulnerable, to be looked at as though you're something meaningful, as though your mere presence is affecting the architecture of someone else's mind. And that's exactly what's happening. Because beauty, real beauty, not just symmetry or fashion, causes disruption. It interrupts routine thought. It changes the room. And when a man is confronted with beauty that touches him not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually even, it's not surprising that he stares, that he momentarily forgets where he is, because that's what beauty does. It suspends time, it demands reverence. And for a man who feels emotionally connected, or who wants to be emotionally connected, that stare is the beginning of a story he hopes might unfold. So if you catch him looking, and then looking away with embarrassment or a faint smile, don't rush to judgment. What you're witnessing might not be awkwardness or immaturity at all. It might be admiration in its rawest form. A quiet moment of honest awe before the mask comes back on and the conversation resumes. Because sometimes the eyes say what the mouth isn't ready to admit. And in that look, fleeting though it may be, you might just glimpse the first page of something real. Ready when you are for point 4. It's peculiar, isn't it? When a man starts teasing a woman he likes, playfully mocking her, giving her a nickname, poking fun at her quirks. At first glance, it can seem immature, even childish, like a scene from a schoolyard rather than a meaningful adult interaction. But if you look a little deeper, if you observe what's actually going on psychologically, it reveals something quite profound. Because teasing in its healthiest form is not about insult, it's about closeness. It's an invitation into a private little world. It's a signal, primitive, perhaps, but powerful, that says, I feel safe enough around you to let my guard down, and I want to see if you'll do the same. This kind of behavior often emerges when a man is emotionally invested, but unsure of how to fully express that investment, especially in cultures where male vulnerability is ridiculed, or where emotional literacy hasn't been developed. The instinct to connect often takes alternative, less direct routes. And teasing becomes one of them, a safe way to bridge intimacy without declaring it outright. So what does he do? He lightly makes fun of the way you talk when you're excited. He rolls his eyes when you obsess over your coffee order. He calls you trouble, or nerd, or some other label that sounds dismissive, but is actually laced with affection. It's a bit paradoxical, affection through provocation, but it works in part because it lowers the stakes. It invites banter instead of confession, and for many men, that's far less terrifying. Now, don't misunderstand. There's a crucial difference between cruelty and affection disguised as mockery. If teasing is condescending, if it belittles you, if it targets your insecurities, that's not attraction, that's manipulation or even contempt. But if it makes you smile despite yourself, if it challenges you to respond playfully, and if it builds rather than breaks the bond, then it's something else entirely. It's courtship clumsy, yes, but sincere. What's fascinating is how ancient this behavior is. You see it in boys long before they know what attraction even means. The boy who pulls the girl's braid or pushes her on the playground isn't trying to hurt her, he's trying to interact with her. He's trying to register on her radar. He's saying, in the only way he knows how, you matter to me. Do I matter to you? And some of that energy, strangely enough, carries into adulthood, especially in moments of vulnerability, especially when the feelings are new and overwhelming. Teasing becomes a shield, a way to get close while pretending to keep a safe distance. It's flirtation wrapped in irony, it's affection hidden in sarcasm. Now, this might not be the most mature expression of love. It's not poetic, it's not composed, but it's honest. It's a man saying, I'm interested in you, but I don't know if you feel the same. So instead of telling you, I'll play with you. So if you find yourself on the receiving end of those odd little jokes, those personalized nicknames, that light-hearted ridicule, pause before dismissing it. Ask yourself, does this make me feel smaller or more seen? Because if it's the latter, then you're not being mocked. You're being noticed, and sometimes being noticed even in the form of a joke is the beginning of something deeply real. It's messy, it's indirect, but it's sincere. Because for many men, especially those unsure of where they stand, humor becomes the first language of love. Not because they're afraid to feel, but because they're feeling more than they know how to say. Let me know when you're ready for point 5. There's something deeply embedded in the masculine psyche, something evolutionary, primal even, that activates when a man begins to care about a woman. And it's not always romantic in the way people expect. It often emerges first as protection, subtle, often unspoken, and at times even confusing. But it's there, and when you know what to look for, it becomes undeniable. He doesn't say, I'm afraid of losing you, or I want to be the one who looks after you. No, those are not words most men are taught to say, or even know how to articulate. Instead, he walks you to your car at night, even when the parking lot is well lit and there's no threat in sight. He clenches his jaw slightly when another man speaks to you a bit too casually. He instinctively steps between you and a crowd, or he checks in. Did you get home okay? As if your well-being has become part of his internal checklist. Now, to the untrained eye, these may seem like small gestures, mere politeness, but psychologically, they represent something far more significant. They are indicators that you have entered his mental world not as a casual presence, but as someone whose safety matters. And that's not something a man grants lightly. You have to understand, men are biologically wired, in part, to protect what they value. That's not to say that a woman needs rescuing or that she's incapable. That's not the point. The point is that when a man feels emotionally invested, there's a natural surge, a protective instinct that arises. It says, this person matters, and I will bear some of the burden to keep her safe, whether she asks for it or not. And that's not control, that's not dominance, it's responsibility, it's voluntary burden bearing. And that's where real masculinity begins, not in aggression, not in posturing, but in choosing to carry something heavy for the sake of someone else. Now, here's where it gets complicated. That instinct, especially early in a relationship, often presents itself awkwardly. He might overreact to something small, he might get jealous and not know how to explain it, he might ask questions that feel intrusive but are really rooted in concern. And because our culture is so quick to pathologize male emotion, these behaviors are often dismissed as possessive or immature. Possessiveness says, you belong to me. Protectiveness says, I care about what happens to you, even when you're not with me. One is about control, the other is about care, and you can feel the difference. This is also why, sometimes, the most stoic men become visibly agitated when someone treats you poorly. Because when a man loves, or even begins to love, it rearranges his priorities. Your pain becomes his problem. Your safety becomes part of his duty, and he may not say it outright. He may never announce it in dramatic fashion, but his behavior, his reactions will tell you everything. So if you notice a man stepping up quietly, not because he wants to be praised or thanked, but because he can't not, pay attention. Because you're not witnessing weakness or insecurity. You're witnessing something much rarer in this modern age, the awakening of masculine responsibility in the presence of genuine affection. And that's not something to mock, it's something to respect, because a man who protects you, without being asked, is a man whose heart is beginning to carry more than just his own weight. Let me know when you'd like to continue with point 6. There's something incredibly revealing about attention. And not just broad, general attention, the kind where someone listens politely or offers the expected responses. No, I'm talking about precision of attention, the kind where a man doesn't just hear you, he registers you. He remembers the little things, the subtle things, things you don't even remember saying. You mention in passing that your favorite scent is jasmine. You said it while talking about your grandmother's garden when you were 6. Most people would nod and move on. But weeks later, he buys you scented candles, and not to impress you, not for praise, simply because he remembered, because it meant something to you. That kind of memory, those small details tucked away and acted upon later, isn't random. It's not coincidence, it's intention, it's focus, and more than that, it's a kind of reverence. A man doesn't remember those details unless he's paying attention at a level that costs him something. Energy, presence, emotional availability. He's mapping who you are, piece by piece, because something about you has disrupted his ordinary pattern of thought. This is what people don't understand about memory in the context of relationships. We remember what we find meaningful. We store what we believe will serve us, consciously or not, in the future. So if a man remembers what you said during a tired 11 p.m. conversation 3 weeks ago, it's not just because he has a good memory. It's because you are psychologically significant to him. And that significance isn't loud. It doesn't come with announcements. It shows up in the way he hands you your favorite drink without asking, or how he notices that you wear less makeup when you're tired, or that you avoid certain songs because they're tied to memories you're not ready to revisit. He picks up on these things not to use them, not to manipulate, but to understand, because understanding is the foundation of real connection. Without it, all you have is performance. Now, here's the paradox. Most people spend their lives screaming to be noticed. Social media, status, validation, constant noise trying to be seen, heard, remembered. But when a man quietly remembers something small, something unprompted, it has more weight than 1,000 compliments. Why? Because it wasn't required of him. No one told him to do it. He chose to hold onto that fragment of your life because somewhere inside him it mattered. That kind of noticing, that deep noticing, is rare, and it's not always easy to recognize because it doesn't show up with grand gestures or dramatic words. It's subtle, quiet, but make no mistake, it's just as powerful, if not more so. A man who remembers the small things is not just showing interest. He's revealing how his internal world is reorganizing to accommodate yours. He's building a blueprint, not of what you look like, but of who you are. And that kind of blueprint isn't made casually. It takes effort. It takes care. So if you ever find yourself wondering whether a man is serious about you, stop listening to what he says for a moment and look at what he remembers. Look at what he repeats back to you, not always in words, but in action, because memory is loyalty's shadow. And when a man remembers you, your words, your quirks, your fears, he's already holding space for you in a way most never will. And maybe that's love in its earliest form, quiet remembrance, attention paid without demand, a silent vow that says, "You don't have to remind me who you are. I already know. Let me know if you'd like a conclusion tying all 6 points together in the same style."